Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of the, still for right now, crowdsourced politics news roundup. I am your host and moderator of the Crowdsourced Politics podcast, Cypher. And if this is your first time coming to the podcast, welcome one and all, and I greatly appreciate you joining us this evening. We do a news roundup similar to the vein of like a 1A roundup, a Diane Rehm show Friday news roundup, and a Sunday news show, all wrapped into one giant package for you, delivered, hand-signed and sealed with the news that was of the last week, with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We do this every Thursday, live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and possibly other places in the near future, but those are the places we do it now. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, depending on how much we have to get through for tonight, the night's news. We also do other podcasts with this, with our group. Those podcasts include Cypher State, which is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast where we have analysts, pundits, and talking heads from across the political spectrum from Twitch and YouTube join us to talk about a particular issue facing the geopolitical stage of the month. This is a monthly topic, and we do that for about roughly an hour each month, give or take, again, depending on how much we have to get through. We are also going to be soon introducing another podcast. In fact, that podcast will have its first episode broadcasted live next week. Time is still to be determined, but it should be around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday. That will be Tuesday, April 26th, roughly at about 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that podcast is called Praxis Run. The point of Praxis Run is to interview activists, budding politicians from across the political spectrum in order to find out what makes them tick, what got them involved in activism, and find out how to put philosophy into practice, otherwise known as praxis. So be sure to check out our first episode again next Tuesday, more than likely going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And thank you, maybe it isn't me, you're one of the most dedicated watchers of this program, and we greatly appreciate you joining us today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the show. All right. Welcome back, everybody. This is the news roundup. And tonight at the top of the roundup, we will discuss Russia's war in Ukraine. So Russia's war on Ukraine has lasted for nearly 2 full months, and Ukraine has endured. We begin tonight with an update. Actually, 1 second. I gotta start. Let me start recording here. All right. All right, tonight we're beginning with an update to Ukraine. So the U.S. has pledged more aid, with President Biden coming out today and announcing additional support for Ukraine. Let's watch a video of that report now.
Last week, I signed an $800 million
Oh, that's way too low.
package of security.
Hold on, that's too low. No, that's too low. Let's start that over.
Their forces need to defend their nation. Last week, I signed an $800 million package of security assistance to Ukraine that included new capabilities like artillery systems and armored personnel carriers, equipment that is responsive to Ukraine's needs and tailored to support the intensified fighting in the Donbas region, which is a different war than in other places because both topographically it's different. It's flat, it's not in the mountains, and it requires different kinds of weapons to be more effective. Today, I'm announcing another $800 million to further augment Ukraine's ability to fight in the east, in the Donbas region. This package includes heavy artillery weapons, dozens of howitzers, and 144,000 rounds of ammunition to go with those howitzers. It also
That's really big, actually.
Tactical drones.
So the howitzers are going to be able to penetrate deeper into Donbass and get over the mountains and actually be able to actually, no, I'm thinking of a different weapon. I found like a freaking idiot. Let's get a picture of a howitzer on here. Howitzer artillery. So no, I was partly right. So let's go ahead and get this on the screen really quick. So yeah, there's a howitzer right there. So that is going to be able to do a lot more, give Ukraine more additional penetration ability and allow them to actually take on a stronger, show a stronger force within the mountainous regions. But let's continue on with what Biden is saying.
In the past 2 months, we've moved weapons and equipment to Ukraine at record speed. We've sent thousands of anti-armor and anti-missile helicopters, drones, grenade launchers, machine guns, rifles, radar systems. More than 50 million rounds of ammunition had already been sent. The United States alone has provided 10 anti-armor.
15 million rounds of ammunition sounds like a lot, but when each person is supposed to be carrying roughly, see, 10, like 7 magazines minimum, that's 210 rounds per person. It doesn't really, it's not a lot, which is why Ukraine keeps asking for more ammunition.
Systems for every 1 Russian tank that's in Ukraine, a 10-to-1 ratio. We're sharing and will continue to share significant timely intelligence with Ukraine to help defend them against Russian aggression. And on top of this, these direct contributions from the United States, we're the outfit facilitating the significant flow of weapons and systems to Ukraine from other allies and partners around the world, like the S-300 long-range anti-aircraft systems that Slovakia recently transferred to Ukraine. We are getting them.
So those anti-aircraft systems are pivotal in being able to successfully defend against bombardment, essentially, from the air. And Ukraine has already been successful in using these systems in order to take out fighter jets and not low bombers, but helicopters and the like. So these are very important. These were the bane of Russia's invasion into Afghanistan in the past in the 80s, and are also used with great effect against U.S. forces when the Taliban still had some of those weapons at their disposal. They quickly used a lot of them. That's why you didn't see so much in the Afghan war, but they do have a good impact. Well, a deadly impact, I should say.
Them in there. We won't always be able to advertise everything that our partners are doing to support Ukraine and its fight for freedom, but to modernize Teddy Roosevelt's famous advice, sometimes we will speak softly and carry a large javelin.
Large javelin, yeah. So that was Biden's words about supplying armament to Ukraine. Continuing on with that, the Treasury Department has also imposed a new wave of sanctions against Russia as of Wednesday. Included in the sanctions package are penalties imposed on more than 40 people and entities accused of evading sanctions. The sanctions include the first set of penalties against a cryptocurrency mining firm in relation to the war. For those that are not aware, cryptocurrency mining is using a ton of computing power in order to solve complicated algorithms that produce a token after the successful end of a mining operation. Essentially, it's fake money, and people really like it, and it's been used to get around sanctions in the past, but also get around taxes and the like, which is why sanctioning these firms themselves is important to also sanctioning Russia. Now, furthermore, this afternoon, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen announced another $500 million in economic aid for Ukraine. The new funding is on top of the $500 million in economic aid that the President Joe Biden unveiled in March. Quote, "We plan to deploy this direct aid to Ukraine as soon as possible, to be used on the most urgent needs," Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said on Thursday. "We know this is only the beginning of what Ukraine will need to rebuild." Treasury Secretary Yellen made good on her promise to walk out of the G20 meeting if Russia was allowed to speak. She was joined by Ukrainian's finance minister and several other finance ministers and central bank governors. Several others who attended the meeting virtually joined the protest by turning off their camera. Now, In more international news, and this one is an interesting story, and I'm sure people are somewhat aware about, is that Canada recently passed a 2-year moratorium on foreign investors buying property in Canada. So if you were considering a vacation home in Canada, well, you're going to have to wait for a bit. That bit being, like I said, 2 years, and here is why. Housing prices in Canada are soaring, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has banned foreign investors from buying homes there. The hope is that this move will put a dent in the rampant price escalation and allow Canadians to afford to buy a home. Realtors and potential buyers are skeptical the plan will have much impact, though. Quote, "I don't think foreign buyers in and of themselves are the dominant buyers in the market." John Paulus, founder and president of Toronto-based Realsophy, told the BBC News. "They're not the cause of rising home prices or rapid rising home prices, but it's still a good policy to put forward." The question of whether the move will make a difference is a valid one, because less than 5% of homes in Toronto and Vancouver regions are owned by foreign investors, according to Statistics Canada. Trudeau's administration feels it needs to do something with housing prices on a rapid incline. The average price for a home has doubled since 2015, and in areas like Toronto, the increase has been even more rapid. Housing prices have risen 28% in the Greater Toronto Area in the past year alone. There's also a housing shortage in Canada, and the supply issue is also being addressed by Trudeau. His budget includes billions for new housing, a new savings account for first-time home buyers, tax credits, and a higher tax for anyone who sells their home within a year of purchasing in an attempt to halt house flipping. The ban does not apply to students, foreign workers, or foreign citizens who are permanent residents in Canada. And Canada has always been very friendly to foreigners, and it has a large foreign population in Canada working. People from the United States often work in Canada. People from all over the world often work in Canada, filling gaps that Canada needs in its labor talent pool, similar to what the U.S. does with its H-1B1 visa. If you work in tech, in any kind of tech field in the United States, chances are you have colleagues that work in Canada and might not be Canadian nationals. So let's talk a little bit more about this move. So as was quoted in the BBC, foreign investors only represent at most 5% of homes in the Toronto and Vancouver areas or regions. So you're going to take that a little bit of pressure off of the real estate market. But the real problems here that's causing home prices to rise is twofold. Lack of supply that is within those areas, similar to what's happening in the United States with the super cities, and investors themselves in Canada buying up properties. In the United States, if you've listened to us before, you would know that up to 20% of the housing market in any one given location has been bought by investment firms or individual investors, LLCs, etc., not as a primary residency, but as a means to increase revenue flow through rents. There is no reason to believe it is any different in Canada, and evidence actually points that Canada is experiencing a similar thing. This gives credence to some of the speculation about the Great Reset, since one of the things that was mentioned in the Great Reset propaganda conspiracy is that people would rent more often. But that is just really capitalism. And what we are seeing here is that a lot of people are making bets that digital nomads would be a more permanent fixture of the economy at large. As more and more people are able to operate and work from home, there is this idea that people will want to move around a lot, go from one super city to another in order to experience as much cultural life and things as possible, while also having a home base, but not in any one particular area. It would not surprise me that if you see that for these areas, you will see leases being up for 6 months or less, rather than the typical year to 15 months you see for a typical apartment lease. So this is something that could actually be a thing that is going to happen a lot more, and investors are actually betting on that to be the case. So if Canada and the United States want to actually tamp down on this, They need to actually go after the investing class itself, and to tamp down on second home purchases from anybody, and focus more of the development and revenue streams and tax incentives, etc., to either builders that are selling homes to a primary resident or to primary residents themselves, and increase the amount of time that a person has to be living at a home to qualify for tax benefits and the like. But that is what's happening in Canada here. Now, continuing on with international news, we have some information and updates about what is happening with refugees. So the UN Refugee Agency says that the UK must stop placing single Ukrainian women fleeing the invasion in the homes of single British men. This is abhorrent. I don't understand why this placement is happening, but it is fucking cringy as hell. Let's continue on. After Russia's invaded Ukraine, the UK government launched the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which saw more than 150,000 people offer up rooms in their homes to those fleeing the invasion. But several UK media reports have detailed how British men are targeting vulnerable single Ukrainian women arriving into the country, in some cases asking for sexual contact in return for a place to stay. This is something that always happens when there's tragedy. There's always some sleazy fucking douchebag out there that wants to exploit a vulnerable person in order to get play. And this is tantamount. This is I'll say it. This is tantamount to rape. Okay, you using an extreme amount of coercion against a person, threatening to have them live on the streets, lose their benefits, their ability to still live in the UK, whatever, unless they give you sexual favors. It's fucking disgusting. And we need to continue on talking about it with additional details coming from the UN Council. Now, a spokesperson for the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees told The Guardian that, quote, a more appropriate matching process is needed so that single women could be paired with women or families. Quote, matching done without the appropriate oversight may lead to increasing the risk women face, in addition to the trauma of displacement, family separation, and violence already experience, because of course it would. The government's Homes for Ukraine system has been heavily criticized domestically, and applicants have been subject to long delays, domestically being in the UK. Several Ukrainian refugees previously told Insider that they are choosing to return to the war-torn Ukraine as they are exhausted by the hunger and homelessness inflicted by the long wait for UK visas. In late March, 16 refugee and anti-trafficking organizations warned that the program was in danger of becoming Tinder for sex traffickers. Quote, by adopting a hands-off approach to matching, there's a high risk that traffickers, criminals, unscrupulous landlords set up matching sites and Facebook pages to prey on the vulnerable, the letter said. Now, according to a tracker run by the United States Human Refugees, the UNHCR, more than 4.6 million Ukrainians have fled the country since Russia invaded on February 24th. We need to talk about this a little bit more here too. This, like I said, when we were talking about it at first, this is something that's going to happen anytime there is this kind of level of tragedy. It happened with vulnerable people fleeing Afghanistan. It happened with vulnerable people fleeing Syria. It happens anytime there is large amounts of vulnerable, especially women, people fleeing an area and needing to rely on the generosity of strangers. And if that generosity of strangers is paired with government incentives, but those incentives are not highly regulated, then the amount of exploitation actually increases, because you incentivize people that may not normally be willing to take this kind of risk, being willing to take it because the reward is actually higher, either through government subsidies or kind of this whole thing of like community involvement, where they can get prestige and stuff because, oh, I helped so many Ukrainian women settle into the Ukraine. Look at me, I'm such a good person. Meanwhile, they're telling these women to, do sexual favors for them. And I'm not going to get more explicit than that. I'll let you all know what kind of things that would be demanded in this situation. And it's a problem. It happens in the United States as well, with people fleeing Central America, coming into the United States, human traffickers in that area, and people trying to prey on people through Craigslist and the like that are looking for homes. It's disgusting, and a public awareness campaign to see the signs of human trafficking. I know those exist, but I think there needs to be more attention put on them, or make it more in your face, get it on more people's screens, like, either through YouTube ads or with something else, and let people know what those signs are so they can possibly see what those signs, see them in their day to day. I'm not telling people to be busybodies, but there are things that need people to intervene in, and this is one of those things. But that's all I'm going to say about this topic. So we are going to now move on to US politics. So both the House and the Senate are out of session this week, but there's still US politics to report on. And one of those things is the semiconductor funding bill. So when they return, the legislature returns, negotiations will continue on legislation to fund semiconductor manufacturing. A global computer chip shortage has made it harder for consumers to get their hands on cars, computers, and other modern day necessities. So Congress is looking to boost chip manufacturing and research in the United States with billions of dollars from the federal government. Excuse me. Both the House and the Senate have passed major legislation on the matter, and the effort is one of lawmakers' final opportunities before the November election to show voters they are addressing this nation's strained supply chain. Both bills contain $52 billion in so-called CHIPS Act funding to subsidize domestic semiconductor manufacturing and research money. Money supporters say could help make the U.S. more competitive with Asian nations, and stay ahead of China's emerging chip industry. In order to pass this legislation, Congress will have to work out considerable differences between the House and Senate versions, and Republicans are already digging in before the negotiations formally begin. President Biden has made the semiconductors legislation a top priority, but he'll need the support of at least 10 Senate Republicans to get the bill on its desk. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell emphasized at the point when congressional leaders recently announced which lawmakers will serve on the committee that works to reconcile the two bills. Without major concessions and changes from the House Democrats, this legislation has no chance of becoming law, Mitch McConnell said. The Senate bill is projected to increase spending by about $250 billion over 10 years, while the House bill would boost spending by more than $400 billion over the same period. The bills diverge on supply chain issues, trade, immigration, and climate change, to name a few areas of disagreement. One of the big ticket items is a $45 billion program in the House bill to enhance supply chains in the United States. There was no such provision in the Senate bill. The money would provide grants, loans, or loan guarantees to companies, local governments, and tribes trying to build or relocate manufacturing plants producing critical goods. Another stark difference is on trade. The House version reauthorizes a program that provides training and financial assistance for those who lose jobs or have their hours cut or increased imports. The Senate has no such provision. Meanwhile, now this one's important. So let's go back to this. So the House is reauthorizing a program that provides training and financial assistance to those who lose their jobs due to increase in imports or, changing in the market, right? And this program hasn't been run very successfully in the past because the jobs being targeted have typically been either jobs that a particular location doesn't exactly need, or it is behind the times and they're training for people for jobs that might not be as needed in 2 or 3 years, and the training takes a year to 18 months to do. So some of the pushback that Republicans are giving on this might actually be warranted. With that said, the program has also lacked funding in general to make it sure that it does address those issues. So I think that the funding piece shouldn't be what's attacked. I think it should be like, hey, if we're going to do this, let's do it better, rather than like, oh, we can't spend money on this, screw people over, right? That's where I'm coming from on that. But let's continue on. Now, the Senate bill includes a trade provision that would exclude more products from tariffs the Trump administration put in place on goods imported from China. Now, those exclusions have almost expired. The Senate bill reinstates them, a priority of business groups such as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Now, it's really funny that, the party of free trade is now saying, hey, no, we can't have trade with China. They're too much of a problem with us. And the Chamber of Commerce is going to do what the Chamber of Commerce does. That's anything that will benefit businesses within the United States. Doesn't matter if they typically talk about pro-free trade agreements in other areas. They're going to do this to make their stuff better. It's a move to make more money. That said, the thing, this should be a gimme, honestly. Republicans and Democrats should come together on this one to a degree, not necessarily increasing tariffs too much, but there is a need to address this sort of situation when it comes to chip manufacturing and putting more chips in the United States. Not only is it very much needed, we need to increase the chip supply globally, and anything that's produced in the United States would be on the global market and won't be contained to the United States. But we also need to be able to manufacture and buy American-made chips in order to avoid any potential issues with chips coming in from China that could have bugs and other things associated with them in order to do spying. This is a thing that we know about. We reported on it a while ago. It might have probably been about a year at this point. But it was Sun Systems, I think. Sun Systems hacked 2021. Yeah. So, or Sun Microsoft Systems. When was it? Microchip hack. I don't remember the exact the exact business that had it happen to them, but there was a major chip manufacturer that there was discovered a vulnerability in that made pretty much every system that exists in the United States vulnerable to cyber attack. And they were slow patching and they were slow announcing it to people. It infected everything. And having chips made in the United States or other friendly nations would help alleviate some of that issue. So this is a thing that Republicans are actually correct about, at least to a degree. I haven't personally read the bill word for word, but they have a point on this one, and it should be allowed, given to them. Let's also continue on. The House bill also addresses immigration, while the Senate bill does not, of course, because the House has more liberals in it, and liberals and progressives are okay with increased immigration, whereas moderate liberals and Republicans are not. So, of course, the version of the bill in the Senate does not include that because it needs more support than the House does. Now, this particular immigration thing would create a new visa category for entrepreneurs and would allow those with an ownership interest in a successful venture to apply to become lawful permanent residents. The House bill, unlike the Senate bill, also touches on climate change. But before we get into that, let's talk about this one. Now, this is a thing that Republicans would normally be for. At least we're talking Republicans prior to, we'll say, 2012 or so. Because what is one thing Republicans had said and continue to say to this day? That we want the quote-unquote right type of immigrant to come into the country. Those that would add greatly to our nation, that would add jobs, that would add their skills and talents to the nation and make America better. One of the critiques of the current immigration system is that we do not have enough visas for those kind of people. And this is a critique that might have some merit. But if they're not going to agree with Democrats on this particular sort of thing, then it really does come off that Republicans aren't pro-proper immigration. They are slowly becoming anti-immigration entirely, or at least very, 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 very low immigration into the United States. For what reason? I'm not going to try to mind read every single Republican. You all have heard the complaints from Republicans throughout the last years or so. And so it should be pretty obvious to a lot of people that some of it is to do with the idea that America is quote unquote full, or we have our own problems and we need to fix those here, stop giving money to immigrants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And some of it is just rank racism. So those are all the kind of factors that go into this. And again, if Republicans aren't going to approve of something that they would normally be for, then we should be on the lookout of when those complaints come into the conversation and tell them they don't actually care about it because they prevented a bill that actually did that. Continuing on with this particular piece of legislation, again, the House bill touches on climate change. It does this by dedicating $8 billion to a fund that helps developing countries adjust to climate change. This is a gimme. This is a thing that, if we want this bill to pass, it's an easy thing to be a giveaway, to just remove it from the bill in order to attract more Republican support, or maybe Joe Manchin support, what have you. He's basically a Republican. Because it's a thing that should probably be in a separate bill that's not tied to something that is this important and needs bipartisan buy-in in order to pass. Now, this we all know is a non-starter for Republicans because they don't want to use taxpayer money to go to other countries. And so, again, this is probably a thing that the Democrats should just say, hey, okay, you got us on this one. We won't put this in the bill. Will that make one of you vote for us? They need to attract that kind of thing, or at least get McConnell to not muster a filibuster against it. Or if they muster a filibuster, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema on board as well. And this is one of those things that could be ripped out of the bill that might be able to do that. So everyone, though, expects that the negotiations will be a slog and it will take a long time and they won't be easy. So that is what we have for congressional updates. Now, let us also talk now about SCOTUS updates. And there's a lot of things that are happening within the current SCOTUS term, and there are things that are very important to the nation because they set practically laws by their rulings. Now, first up on today's update is a case that was decided earlier this month that showed court bipartisanship, and the subject was a lawsuit against a police officer for violation of constitutional rights. We're going to turn now to SCOTUS blog to hear their recap of it.
Today, the Supreme Court made it easier, at least slightly, for people suing police officers or other state actors for violating their constitutional rights. Larry Thompson was arrested after his sister-in-law, who has mental health issues, falsely told police that he was sexually assaulting his infant daughter. Thompson was charged with resisting
Are you kidding me? Jesus fuck.
Arrest and obstruction of a government investigation when he tried to block the police from entering his apartment. After a medical evaluation showing no signs of abuse, prosecutors dropped the charges. Thompson sued the police officers under a law that lets citizens recover money damages when their constitutional rights are violated. They're called Section 1983 claims because the law is 42 U.S. Code 1983. But if you Google 1983 suits, this is actually what comes up, so don't do that. Thompson's core claim was that the officers initiated criminal charges without having probable cause. Now, to succeed in a case like this one thing Thompson has to show is that the criminal proceeding was terminated in his favor. And the question in this case before the Supreme Court was, what exactly does that mean? Well, here, the police argued that favorable termination means that Thompson needs to affirmatively show his innocence. But Thompson argued it should be enough just to show that the criminal proceedings didn't produce a conviction. In a 6-3 opinion by Justice Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court sided.
Good job on Kavanaugh. There's a lot of flack that was given to Kavanaugh, and I still don't particularly like him as a justice for numerous of different reasons, but he does seem to be a little bit more of a civil libertarian than people had given him credit for. I'll say that.
with Thompson, saying if the proceeding is terminated, however terminated is defined, that termination is favorable when there is no conviction. So there's no requirement for an affirmative showing of innocence. Justice Alito, joined by Justices Gorsuch and Thomas, dissented.
Now, of course, these three dissented. Alito is very much I'll just say it, he's kind of a authoritarian-like figure, gives all deference to police and authority. Clarence Thomas is also similar in that nature. Now, it's a little bit weird that that Gorsuch would rule in this favor, and I'm curious of what the SCOTUS blog says about that. But if I had to take a guess, it was probably something along the lines of the opposite of Kavanaugh, saying that the plain language of the law, it stipulates blah, 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 blah. It's bullshit. Textualism is kind of a fucking bullshit sort of thing. And we talked about that in our news roundup 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Judge Jackson, sorry about that, Judge Jackson, and how she is more of a religionalist than what we're saying. So, that's exactly what Thomas said. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Today, the Supreme Court made it easier, at least slightly, for people suing police. It should be enough just to show that the criminal proceedings didn't produce a conviction. In a 6-3 opinion by Justice Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court sided with Thompson, saying if the proceeding is terminated, however terminated is defined, that termination is favorable when there is no conviction. So there's no requirement for an affirmative showing of innocence. Justice Alito, joined by Justices Gorsuch and Thomas, dissented. Today, the Supreme Court made it...
That was it. Okay. My bad. I didn't need to replay that. All right. Well, let's continue on. So there's also a case that the SCOTUS said today where the Supreme Court said that Congress is not required to extend federal disability benefits to residents of Puerto Rico because, of course, the SCOTUS said that. They treat Puerto Rico... Okay. Puerto Rico has been treated, legally speaking, like a colony of the United States since it has been part of the United States territory. And the Supreme Court is very much in favor of that status quo with its current makeup. So it is no surprise to me that it would
made it easier.
Oh God, stop it.
At least.
Sorry about that. Let's rewind. All right. So the Supreme Court has consistently ruled that Puerto Rico is a colony and doesn't have to be under the same rules and jurisdictions as the United States because it's a protectorate. And so it doesn't surprise me that this conservative Supreme Court would rule in this way. Now, that's not to say that only the conservatives did it, because again, the Supreme Court has been consistent on this. So the court ruled 8-1 against the bid by Puerto Rico residents to receive equal treatment under the Supplemental Security Income Program. Justice Brett Kavanaugh delivered the opinion for the majority. Justice Sotomayor was the only dissenter in the case, because of course she was. She's the most liberal person on the bench right now. Let's continue on. The safety net program signed into law by President Richard Nixon in 1972 provides monthly payments to older Americans and people with disabilities or blindness. Quote, the question presented is whether the equal protection component of the Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause requires Congress to make supplemental security income benefits available to residents of Puerto Rico to the same extent that Congress makes those benefits available to residents of the states, Kavanaugh wrote. In light of the text of the Constitution, long historical practice, and this court's precedents, the answer is no. And sadly, that is par for the course, and it's probably correct given how the law has been structured in the country, which is why I am in favor of Puerto Rico either becoming independent or a state. This whole fucking two-tiered system we have with honestly, I'm just going to keep calling them colonies because that's how they're being treated with all our colonies, is not only asinine, but it's immoral. So in her dissent, though, Sotomayor, who is Puerto Rican, called it utterly irrational to deny SSI benefits to Puerto Rico residents because they don't pay enough in taxes. She said Congress' decision to deny them a social safety net it provides to nearly all other U.S. citizens, which all these people are, they're U.S. citizens. I accidentally hit a button on my computer. They're U.S. citizens is bullshit. She said that Congress' decision to deny these Social Security net benefits provides nearly all U.S. citizens is especially cruel given that those citizens' dire need for aid. Quote, she continues on to say that in her view, there is no rational basis for Congress to treat needy citizens living anywhere in the United States so differently from others. To hold otherwise, as this court does, is irrational and antithetical to the very nature of the SSI program and the equal protection of citizens guaranteed by the Constitution. Now, Puerto Rico's governor lambasted the decision by the Supreme Court and said it was underscored the need for Puerto Rico to be granted statehood. I couldn't agree more. He went on to say that, quote, the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Vallero Maduro on the Supplemental Security Income Program proves once again that the territorial status of Puerto Rico is discriminatory for American citizens on the island and allows Congress to do whatever they want with us, he said in a statement. 100%. Make no mistake about it. This is fucking true. Now, clearly, our people, he goes on to say, clearly, our people, particularly the most vulnerable, suffer consequences of this unequal treatment under the American flag. Enough of this colonial status that discriminates against us and affects our quality of life, he said. Now, the court's 8-member majority further warned that the decision in favor of Vallero Maduro would usher in potentially far-reaching consequences because lawmakers would have to extend many other federal benefit programs to residents of the U.S. 5 territories, which is why they ruled in this way. Make no mistake about it, this is about money and not wanting to treat everybody equally, and that are citizens of the United States and are not only citizens, but fall under the jurisdiction of the United States, its rules, regulations, and everything. This is further cementing their colonial status, and it's fucking stupid. Now, by extension, Kavanaugh wrote that residents in 50 states could then call for federal taxes to be imposed on residents of Puerto Rico and other territories, which he said would impose significant financial burden on Puerto Rico residents and have serious implications for their economy. This is probably partially true, but who cares? These places should be states anyways, and their colonial status is what prevents them from being able to be built up and be fully integrated in the United States in the first place. And I think this is going to end up being a segment, honestly, that we're going to publish separately. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking about. Well, no, I think there's some more that can be said here. So the 5 U.S. territories, right? They've been, like I said, they've been treated like this for a very long time, since their inception, honestly, since they were won from different wars, what have you, right? And if less white people lived in Hawaii and if less people lived in Hawaii would probably be treated like a colony right now too. Let's be real. Probably wouldn't have gotten statehood. So yeah, end it. Colonialism is stupid. It's counterproductive. It's inhumane. And we need to just integrate all these people into the United States proper. I don't care. Have 55 stars on the flag. I don't care. Just make the flag one giant star. One nation, indivisible. Liberty and justice for all. Finally. But with that, I am going to end that segment. Now, if you particularly have news that you want us to cover on this program, or if you'd like to join one of our panels, here is how to let us know about it. First, you can hit me up on Discord. You can find the Discord links above, below. I'll drop a link in the chat, possibly if I can quickly get it. But you can join the Discord community. We're going to be building up a better Discord community. Contest, prizes, the like, talks, hangouts, whatever. Discord is where it is at. You can also hit me up on Twitter for now at Crowdsourced Poll, where I like to post memes and a bunch of other things, whatever I feel like it. You can hit me personally, I run that account on Twitter to get more into the show. And if you do it, and I know not everybody does, a lot of people that watch these streams do not use Facebook, but if you have Facebook, we have a Facebook group that you can also join, which is at /groups/Tribune Commons, where we have a community of roughly 500 people or so that talk about news and politics and stuff like that, with hopefully a little less vitriol than you're used to. So that is what it's at. So join us on all the social medias, guys, or guys and gals and anybody else. So yeah, it's happening. We like to do it. So there is another thing from the Supreme Court, and that is coming out of the Supreme Court has declined to hear a challenge to the $10,000 state and local tax deduction cap, which is a Trump-era tax law that hit the pockets of wealthy people in blue states. Wealthy people, blue states, wealthy because their houses are worth more, not necessarily because they're like, rich. Upper middle class? Perhaps. More than likely, yes. But rich, like Jeff Bezos? Not at all. So New York led a group of states, including Connecticut, Maryland, and New Jersey, all states with high property values, in seeking to strike down the law that limits people of deducting $10,000 of state and local taxes from their federal tax bill. The cap was enacted as part of the 2017 Trump tax bill as a way to offset other cuts. The states had argued that the cap improperly encroaches on their taxing ability. Quote, the long history of federal income taxation demonstrates that Congress and the states equally understood that a deduction for all or nearly all state and local property and income taxes was constitutionally required to preserve state sovereignty, taxing authority, the states wrote in their March court filings. Now, in October of last year, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals had rejected the state's argument that the deduction was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court did not give a reason for why it declined to hear the case, but that leaves the Second Court of Appeals ruling it stands. It leaves it in good standing, which means they either agreed with it or there wasn't enough back and forth suits to warrant the Supreme Court stepping in. But that concludes our SCOTUS stuff. So let us get into state and local politics, starting with Georgia. So in a bid to prevent Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from running for a second term, 5 Georgia voters filed a lawsuit saying Greene is ineligible to run for federal office under the 14th Amendment. What? So what the group is claiming is that she voluntarily aided and engaged in the Capitol riot insurrection. That amendment was ratified after the Civil War to prevent Confederate officers and officials from holding public office in the United States. Let's go to Mary Taylor Greene's own words about that. If I have it up still. No, of course it. I don't know. Back. Okay, I gotta pull up the link again. Hold on. I don't know what happened to it. So, history. I had it up, guys. I swear. There we go. Got it. All right. So let's hear that in her own words. And as everybody knows that does streaming, sometimes technology gets a little bit around us. All right. Do I have it up? Do I have it up? I have it up. All right. Let's go ahead and watch.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Again, you want to talk about it? It's a big lie. They want to talk about the big lie. This is the big lie, and they're destroying democracy.
I know you are, but what am I?
Marjorie, will cameras or recording device or anything be allowed in that courtroom on
Of course they will.
Friday so the American people,
Yes.
so the Georgia voters can hear and see what they're trying to do to you?
Yeah, and I really hope that real America, I hope you guys get in there and get a camera in that courtroom because you know what the Democrats and the media are going to do. They're going to click and cut.
Everybody's going to click and cut. That's what people do now. It's called propaganda. Stop lying.
Of course.
So they can sell a lie on their networks every single night on CNN and MSNBC.
As she speaks on OAN. Irony.
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
Against, you know,
Oh, all right. So that was the whole video. So let's talk about it. So this is a further quote that she has said. So she said, "It is absurd what they're claiming, lying about. They're going to allow the press in the courtroom. They're going to allow the whole thing to be videoed, live out to go anywhere in the world that they want to. And you know what that's going to look like? Democrats and their nasty mainstream media, you know, the ones that lie about me constantly anyways, well, they're going to be able to twist and turn the clip out of any little piece that they want of the horrible things that they have funded and attorneys are going to try to say about me." So these, of course, she's going to say this because she's trying to protect her ability to still run for Congress, and she's going to hype up anything in order to make money from this. But let's talk about why this is even a thing. All right. So now attorneys can request that the public, which includes the press, be barred from courtrooms if they can present reasonable evidence to suggest that such access would hinder a defendant's right to a fair trial. Courtrooms are also closed during trials to protect juveniles, or in some cases, to protect the privacy of witnesses, jurors, or victims. Unfortunately for Ms. Green, a defendant trying to avoid the press publishing critical information is not by itself a qualifying justification for closing a court. So Ms. Green tried to stop the trial by asking for an injunction and a temporary restraining order against it. But Judge Amy Totenberg of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia rejected said request. The judge said that Ms. Green failed to demonstrate that she had a substantial likelihood of succeeding in the case. The group suing Ms. Green is representative of a group called Free Speech for People. The group also launched a similar challenge aimed at Republican Congressman Madison Cawthorn, but a judge blocked that lawsuit from proceeding. If Green is found to be in violation of the 14th Amendment, her name will either be stricken from the ballot, or if the ballots are already printed, voters will be advised that she is disqualified and any votes for her will be discarded. Now, we need to talk a little bit more about this case here. Okay, so there's several ways that Miss Green, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congressman Green, had tried to get this case thrown out. One of them was saying, hey, Congress gave everybody amnesty from the Civil War, so this law shouldn't apply to me. Now, this isn't to say that she's stupid, okay? This is just to say that this is how lawyers operate, okay? I'm not saying that this is something that she herself put, but what a lawyer will try to do is they'll throw everything in the kitchen sink at a case and see what spaghetti ends up sticking to the wall to make the case go away. So their argument was that since Congress passed this amendment for the Civil War, and then the Congress said, hey, all the people for the Civil War, you're forgiven, you can come back into the fold, then it doesn't apply to Green. But that's not how the law works. The law required that the law didn't stipulate just people of the Civil War. It said anybody, and it requires anytime a person is said to have violated the law to have to require a 2/3 majority of votes of Congress in order to be readmitted and allowed back to run for election. So that is why that segment had been thrown out. Ms. Green also tried to claim that their First Amendment rights were being violated for her pursuit to run for office, as if running for office isn't in of itself protected under the First Amendment. It's not. Congress, in the Constitution, there's various ways for Congress to say that such and such person cannot run for office or be a sitting congressman. So her ability to run for office is not protected under the First Amendment, and that's why the judge said that was not pertinent. So those are some of the things that she tried to do. Yeah, she is freaking nuts. I agree to that. Maybe it isn't me. She is fucking nuts. So the way that she's going about this and the way she's drumming it up could be for two reasons. First and foremost, could just be campaigning, right? She's running for re-election. She wants to make sure that she's able to get as many people out to vote for her as possible. And maybe she doesn't fear that there's anything going to happen to her and that she won't lose her ability to run for office. The second reason and the one that I personally think is more likely, is that she's worried that having to serve under deposition and potentially having to testify under oath, that she'll have to tell on herself, invoke her Fifth Amendment rights, or anything else like this that would poison her ability to actually win an election again, because it will give credence, whether true or not, that she actually helped participate in the insurrection. Now, there have been reports since 2020 that she was one of the people that did tours and showed people where offices were and stuff like that. I think she was the person that said, that I know Bobbitt said this is 1776. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, that was Lauren Bobbitt said that. I think Green said revolution or something. Taylor, Green, revolution. Yeah, I think that she said something like that. She tweeted something of herself, like, so they all kind of went along with it. And honestly, if they're found to be having been in insurrection or helping foment the violence that happened on the Capitol, and the attempt to not have Congress participate in its duly formed office, then she shouldn't be allowed to run for office. So yeah, there's that. Will anything come of this? Honestly, probably not. She's going to have to be under deposition, and those depositions will be made public. But will that be enough to sway people? And will the Supreme Court, because it will go to the Supreme Court, make no mistake about that. She could lose this case, and it's going to be appealed, right? It's going to be appealed to the Supreme Court, regardless of who wins or loses. But if she loses this case, she's going to appeal, like, right away. And there's going to be an emergency injunction, all these other things, right? So we are likely not to see her lose, but it's going to be very illuminating what she has to say under oath. And I, for one, am delighted that we're going to actually see some of this stuff. So if you're delighted to see that, be sure to stay tuned to us every week, because as we get updates about this, we'll update you all and give you the kind of analysis only we provide over here. But let's continue on with some information about Texas now. So next up in performative politics is Texas Governor Greg Abbott's short-lived extended safety inspection of trucks at the southern border that it cost the U.S. almost $9 billion in 10 days. Oh, thanks for the follow. Thanks for the follow, Skeptics Guy. Appreciate it. Wait, you okay? I don't know what you're talking about, so let's okay, Skeptic Sky. I didn't mention anything about Islam or anything like that, so probably go away. I'm not talking about it. Yeah, you're not being Islamophobic, but you're putting in information that doesn't pertain to the channel. So we're gonna go ahead and I'll give you the ability to rectify yourself, but if not, I'm gonna mute you. So anyways, let's continue on with Texas, and let's rewind this a bit about here. So as stated, Texas did some performative politics when Governor Greg Abbott tried to create this extended safety inspection of trucks to prevent illegal immigration into the United States from the southern border. And this particular political theater has cost the U.S. and in total $9 billion in just 10 days. Now, Abbott enacted the policy on April 6. It snarled truck traffic at the border and led to a protest by Mexican truckers that stopped trade at some major crossings. On April 15th, Abbott ended the double inspection, for which he received withering criticism from both sides of the border and the aisle. The inspection stopped after Abbott struck deals with the governors of 4 Mexican states that border Texas. An analysis of the Perryman Group showed that the U.S. lost an estimated $8.97 billion in GDP due to delays at the border, while Texas alone lost around $4.23 billion. Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic contesting Abbott's bid for a third term as governor, slammed Abbott for his costly gambit. Quote, Abbott jacked up inflation, increased prices at our stores, hurt Texas businesses, killed jobs, and shut down billions of dollars in trade. Abbott says the financial pain is necessary. I say electoral consequences are necessary. So let's talk about this a bit, right? What Abbott is actually trying to do, unlike some other governors, is not run for president. He is trying to ensure that he wins his election in Texas because he is catering to largely a very, very conservative demographic base. More conservative than the country at large. Not saying that Texas isn't somewhat purple, it is, but Texas conservatives happen to be a bit more conservative than your average conservatives. And all these moves in the last 4 or 5 months have been in an attempt and an effort to ensure that he not only wins the primary, but he shows Texas Republican activists and people that will donate money to his campaign, because there's a ton of activist money going to Republicans in Texas from Texans. And we're talking like fundamentalist Christians, talking like virulently anti-immigration activists, etc. And that is what we have here. That's what he's trying to do. So it isn't one of those situations where he's trying for a bid for governor or for president. He's just trying to make sure that the money keeps flowing to him so he can keep getting that fat cash. And that's why Texas. I love Texas. I live in Texas, but I also hate Texas. And this is one of those reasons, because of bullshit like this. All right. So that is what we're seeing here. How do I mute? Oh, I got it. Okay. So yeah. No. We're going to continue on in a second here, but we're going to do this real quick. There we go. All right. So, we don't tolerate bigotry on this channel. All right. We will talk about anybody and everything on the channel. What we won't do is have somebody come in here to try to stop the flow of the news with things that don't matter and aren't pertinent to what we're talking about. So that's why you were muted. Now, let's continue on though with the news roundup, everybody. All right. So coming also out of Texas is some information from Ted Cruz about loose morals or something. What is that? Well, the junior senator from Texas made the news again this week, this time because he has some thoughts about Disney characters. We like to give people an opportunity to say things in their own words, so let's go ahead and hear what Ted Cruz himself has to say.
I think there are people who are misguided, trying to drive, Disney stepping in saying, in every episode now they're going to have, Mickey and Pluto going at it. Like, really? Thank you for
Now the people he's talking to are super conservative activists. Oh.
that image, Senator. But it's just like, come on, guys. Like these are kids, and you can always shift to Cinemax if you want that.
So this is not being done in Disney programming whatsoever. It wasn't until recently that Disney even had R-rated programming. So when he says going at it, he's just outright lying, being exaggerative for maybe political effect. But what is actually being talked about here, well, we'll let him finish and then I'll say it.
Like why do you have... It used to be, look, I'm a dad. Like, you used to be able to put your kids on the Disney Channel and be like, all right, something innocuous will happen.
So what this is actually being discussed here, and we should not make any mistakes about it, is that what they are talking about is the introduction of gay, bisexual, and probably, I think there's some trans characters in some children programming. And that happened after, the last 5 or 6 years or so. And the reason that happened, well, is thanks to the grand old free market that Ted Cruz loved to hate, or loved to love until he loved to hate it. And so what we are seeing here is that there is more inclusive programming being brought to the Disney Channel, and that is causing conservatives to get their feathers ruffled. Get them to be like, ew, gross, we can't have that. Never mind the fact that Disney's children's programming, since its foundation, had heterosexual relationships and relationships between animals and all sorts of other stuff on the screen. And even at times, let's be real here, at times, some hidden adult humor in it. There's the scene from Beauty and the Beast where the maid, after they turn back into humans, the maid walks by and does the little feather duster in the candlestick's face, and that was an innuendo because that was her underskirt when she was a feather duster. Things like that, right? And they didn't have anything to say about that at all. But by golly gee, if there's gay people on the screen, I can't let my kids watch that. What if they turn gay? They're not going to turn gay. They might think being gay is okay, but you can't change someone's sexuality that way, man. Maybe this is why we should teach sexuality in school, so you actually know something that you're to talk about. But that is what we are seeing here. It is outright propaganda and outright culture war bullshit that is coming out of Republicans in order to gin up their base, in order to vote for them so they can continue to give tax cuts to the wealthy. Or tax cuts to the wealthy and also actually believe this nonsense. There's reasons to believe that Ted Cruz himself might be a dominionist, and a lot of people within the Republican Party on the upper leadership and their donor bases are also fundamentalist Christians in that regard. So this is what we're kind of seeing coming out of the places and things that we're seeing here. But we have more stuff to talk about. So continuing on with political theater, let's go check on Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis and see what he is up to this week. Settle in, because this is going to take a minute, and we're going to continue on with Disney stuff. Because Disney has entered the cultural war, everybody. Choose your character. Republicans or Disney? All right? So following Ted Cruz in the battle against the woke forces of Disney, Florida lawmakers voted to strip Walt Disney World of its ability to basically self-govern its properties. This marks the latest development in the war between state Republicans and the company over legislation known by critics as Don't Say Gay. Disney has enjoyed a special taxing governance district since 1967 to act as a county government for Disney. It handles services such as power, water, roads, and fire protection. The districts could even build a nuclear power plant if it wanted. The Reedy Creek Improvement District landowners, primarily Walt Disney World, has been responsible for the cost. The legislation would sunset Reedy Creek by June 2023 unless the legislature reauthorizes it. Disney has long had privileges in the state that no other company has in Florida, including its competitors, said Republican State Representative Randy Fine, a leader in the legislation effort. And some provisions in the district charter are nuts, such as the right to create its own nuclear power plant, to take land outside of the district. The legislation passed without debate because of a protest Democrats staged on the House floor over the redistricting maps. Now, Disney will need to decide over the next year if they want to reconstitute Reedy Creek, working with members of the state legislature, Fine said. He said he's open to that discussion, but with limitations. Quote, "They're not going to get the right to build a nuclear power plant," Fine said after the vote. "They're not going to have the right to take, other people's property without their consent. Look, we treat all guests to our state with respect, assuming they share the same back," he said. Some of these things are actually not bad, right? The ability to build a nuclear power plant, probably Disney shouldn't have the ability to do that. Being able to do eminent domain without the state legislature stepping in or having any conditional court oversight, yeah, that's not cool either. So these are things that were a long time coming, but it's kind of curious, isn't it, that just now Republicans are wanting to be able to say these things and do these things. So Curious, right? Couldn't be anything that we've just talked about, could it? No, it very much is. So a Disney spokesman did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the bill's passage. Now DeSantis, who, make no mistake, is a potential Republican presidential contender, everything he's been doing over the last, 7 months has been a bid in order to generate political buzz for him personally on the national stage. Had called for the passage of legislation this week during a feud with Disney over the company's opposition to the parental rights in education legislation, which DeSantis signed on March 28th, which is that Don't Say Gay bill. Now, opponents of the law call it the Don't Say Gay because it bans classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity in grades K through 3. But more importantly, in any manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. This is not defined at all. The description is very vague, and it is designed to lead to unnecessary legal wrangling because it gives parents the ability to sue school districts for violating the spirit of the bill. By keeping it vague, you open up school districts all across the state of Florida to being sued over a parent not wanting their kid to even know gay people exist, to know that to have proper safe sex, that sex is even a thing, that transgender people are even a thing. And so if this is talked about in school at any level, some parent is likely to become an activist and sue the teacher and the school board for it. Rumors are already circulating that a teacher had been already sued and the district is already in the process of being sued for wearing a shirt that says protect trans kids. That is what is being done here. They are trying to use the force of law to enforce their own religious ideology onto the rest of us. So yeah, continuing on though. So Disney CEO Bob Chapek announced in March that the company would halt donations to political campaigns in the state over legislation and donate $5 million to LGBTQ groups instead. That is what this is really about. They turned off the money trough, so now Florida is going to come in and give them a whole sucker, all right? So now DeSantis has attacked Disney as a quote-unquote woke corporation for opposing the legislation. The Miami Herald warned Wednesday that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is taking a page from the disgraced former President Nixon's book with his attack on Disney. An editorial in the Herald condemned DeSantis for his push as a, quote, act of pure vengeance, because it is, and the stuff of Richard Nixon and his enemy list. It is analogous to it. The Herald went on to say, quote, it's clear the governor has been nursing a towering grudge against Disney ever since the company had the nerve to listen to its employees and belatedly, but rightly, speak out against the Don't Say Gay bill by withholding political campaign contributions in Florida, the scathing editorial said. DeSantis is, quote, using the levers of government to crush his enemy. And his claim of simply trying to eliminate pre-1968 special taxing districts doesn't pass the smell test because it is a pernicious missile strike aimed at the entertainment industry or company. I mean, at this point, industry actually works. Because, hey, they turned off the money trough, so that means they're going to go fighting, right? So the editorial continues on to say, back in 1971, Nixon's list had 20 names on it. Over the next few years, it grew to 576 names. We all know how that ended, the newspaper concluded. Now we have DeSantis frightening misuse of political power as well. It must stop here, and that starts with lawmakers stiffening their backbones. Today it's Disney. Tomorrow, who knows? And there's no reason to believe that tomorrow, who knows, is hyperbole. Now, the move could have local counties with more than $1 billion in liabilities and increase taxes on local residents as well. And in the same vein, though, DeSantis has also gone after textbooks. So Florida's Department of Education rejected a record number of math textbooks in which reviewers accused publishers of injecting social and emotional learning into the subject. Quote, There is a movement to say math should not be about getting the right answer, but more about social and emotional response, DeSantis, a Republican, said at the event in the Villages, Florida, when asked by a reporter about the rejections, which applied to grades K through 12. This type of learning would continue to be rejected in Florida, he pledged, saying that the school district and others in other states were moving toward a more sociological and political type of learning. It doesn't matter how you feel about the math problems, DeSantis says. It matters whether you can solve the math problem. So DeSantis' latest comments came after reviewers rejected 54 out of 132 math textbooks that the school district submitted, a record according to Florida's Department of Education. Aside from accusations that the textbooks violated standards by invoking social and emotional learning, reviewers also said they found references to what they term as critical race theory, which we will consider to say on this program. When people say critical race theory, they mean anything that increases diversity, equity, inclusion, acknowledgement of racism, etc. If it has a reference to white privilege or racial disparities, etc., that's all being conglomerated into critical race theory for Republicans. And they're not quite wrong about that, or at least not as wrong as some liberals want to say. Now, in addition, they rejected books that included Common Core, a set of national learning standards DeSantis abolished through executive order in 2019. The state hasn't released details about which sections of the book reviewers found objectionable, though it did release a list of the rejected textbooks on Monday, which we will go through on the program at some point. So many educators were alarmed by the news that textbooks they submitted had been rejected. The Florida's Education Association wants more transparency on the matter. Andrew Spar, head president of the union, said in a statement, quote, "How about defining those terms and giving examples of objectionable content," Spar said of critical race theory and social emotional learning. DeSantis said Tuesday that he would be open to releasing details about the prohibited content, but that the state had its hands tied legally because the information in textbooks is copyrighted. That's nonsense. Under fair use, you can release excerpts from a book. He's lying. He just doesn't want to give ammunition so people can try to get around it. Well, around his bullshit reasonings anyways. Quote, "It's sad that we are even in a situation where we have to do this," DeSantis said. "But the fact of the matter is, in some of these textbooks, companies, this education establishment, it has gotten increasingly politicized and they are trying to do ideology. In the last couple of years, both critical race theory and social emotional learning have become hot button issues for conservatives." Now, before I finish off this segment with additional information, I do want to point out what some of the things that I have read that conservatives have complained about. One of those things in a math book is that it was teaching basic statistics, and it mentioned disparate impact. And that would be the wealth. I think it mentioned specifically the wealth gap. So it looked at how wealth is distributed in the United States and showed statistically how black people have less wealth than what the numbers would usually say that they should have, everything else being equal, right? And it talks about how that is statistically significant and etc. They don't want any mention of things like that in education, period. And the fact that it's in a math textbook gets them real riled up because of, culture war, and math is math. It doesn't need to be anything else other than math, right answers, right? Another thing that Republicans are complaining about, and this was mentioned before, is that they don't like this focus on not getting the right answer. There's some truth to this, but it is important to understand why this is the case. What is actually being de-emphasized here is not getting the right answer, but de-emphasizing that getting the wrong answer is horrible. That is what's happening here in those cases. Anytime that a person says, hey, you shouldn't focus on getting the right answer, you should focus on other things, what they're actually talking about is what are the steps to get the right answer? How many of those steps were correct? Point out where the mistake was made. Allow the student that had gotten the steps right in the process to score some points. And it's not like a grade curve or anything like that, because all students would get this, but it's important to understand the steps and processes in order to actually do advanced math. And that is why they are saying to de-emphasize getting the right answer and instead focusing on processes, how to get the right answer. This isn't to say that a student wouldn't be penalized for getting the wrong answer. It's just to say to show that you're not stupid for getting the wrong answer and things like that. There's some truth to that. It was one of the things that I had a math teacher in high school focused on as well. He wanted to see every step in the process. He in fact would actually give less points to people that just got the answer and didn't show how they got there, because he wanted people to explicitly say how they got to the right answer so that the process of getting that answer was more understood, again, for advanced math. So that's some of the things that they're talking about here. So let's continue on. Sorry, I think I need to take a drink. Man, it is hot in this room. All right. Now, continuing on, Democrats are also accusing Republicans of trying to whitewash history with their attacks on critical race theory, while Republicans use the word critical race theory, as I previously said, as the catch-all term. Now, social and emotional learning strategies can include helping students to cope with stress or anxiety, among other preventive measures, many educators say. This is helping students understand grit and working through feelings and anxiety and that sort of thing, but apparently Republicans think that this is just a back door in order to inject CRT principles into education. That's why they're against this. Probably because it acknowledges that some people might be under stress because of racism or something else like that. I don't know, Republicans are very much not forthcoming with reasons for these kind of things, to say the least. But that is one of the issues in my estimation. So, yeah. Let's continue on. So let's continue on, though. Sorry, I accidentally alt-tabbed. All right. Now, publishers have the option to appeal the textbooks in Florida or to revise their materials and resubmit them for approval. Richard Corcoran, the state education commissioner, said at Tuesday's event. They also can sue, he said, and if it happens, then the public will be able to see what content state reviewers found objectionable. Whatever the content is, it has to be geared towards helping our children get a world-class education, Corcoran said. If it's something other than that, we're not interested. And finally, wrapping up the state program, finally wrapping up Florida's progress, is that the bill, rewinding a little bit. So, and finally, to wrap up our segment about Florida, we're going to have a brief update about the Florida congressional maps. As anticipated and reported last week on this program, Florida's legislature had approved the gerrymandered congressional map that is a blatant violation of the Florida state constitution. However, the vote this week on the map will not be the end of the process since, as we stated last week, the map is designed to challenge Florida's constitution all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, the League of Women Voters of Florida said the DeSantis map violates the state constitution, which requires continuous districts that don't benefit or hurt political party, incumbent, or candidates. It also says the districts cannot be drawn to reduce minority access to elect representatives. For DeSantis' part, he argues that since the provision was passed by voters in 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled race can't be a primary factor in drawing districts. Quote, the legislature's irresponsible plan to capitulate to the aggression of the governor nullifies the constitutionally mandated separation of the three branches of government and is moving in the direction of an autocracy, said the league president Cecil Scone. As this case makes its way through the legal process, we will be sure to cover it. And finally, to wrap up our segment about states politics that is coming up, we have a story coming out of Nebraska. So in a different sort of spectacle, the Trump-endorsed candidate for governor of Nebraska has been accused by 8 women of groping, sexual harassment, and groping is sexual assault. Charles Herbster is facing multiple sexual misconduct allegations, news that could further upend what has become an increasingly contentious GOP primary in the conservative state. The Nebraska Examiner, a local independent media outlet, reported that 8 women, including a current Republican Nebraska state senator, have accused Herbster of sexual misconduct. 6 women told the publication that Herbster touched them inappropriately. A 7th woman said Herbster once cornered her privately and kissed her forcibly. Herbster has strongly denied any of these allegations. The Examiner granted anonymity to 7 of the women based on the publication's policy concerning sexual assault allegations, and that the women expressed fear of reprisal if they came forward. However, State Senator Julie Salma went on record with her account. Salma said Herbster reached up her skirt and inappropriately touched her during a 2019 event. We have her document that she published on Twitter here, so we're going to go ahead and read that here. All right. So today's Nebraska Examiner report about Charles Herbster sexually assaulted me in 2019 when I was 22 years old is true. I indirectly referenced the assault in a February 2022 floor speech in the legislature and prayed I would never have to relive this trauma. When the Nebraska Examiner contacted me about a witness's account of my assault and the several other women who shared their stories, I was not going to deny the truth. I am not seeking media attention or any other gain. I simply was not going to lie and say it did not occur. I would request my family's privacy and respect at this difficult time, which is 100% fair. And I'm glad that she didn't lie about this or anything of that nature. Now, former U.S. Congressman and Omaha Mayor Hal Daub told a local TV station that Selma should be put on the stand and be subject to questions about her alleged assault. And with these cases, somebody is going to bring up, and of course he did, he's going to bring up, I'd like to ask her what she was wearing, Daub told KMTV, as if that fucking matters. Salma later fired back, posting a photo of the dress she was wearing, and we have that as well, as she posted that on Twitter. So we're going to go over to that really quick. So, former Omaha Mayor Hal Daub, in response to reports of my sexual assault, I'd like to ask her what she was wearing. This is the dress that I was wearing when I was sexually assaulted. There is nothing overtly sexual about this dress. Even if there was, though, that does not give anybody to do what he did to her. That is sexual assault. That is devastating to many people to experience it. And the fact that anybody in 2022, and I thought I would never say that, in the year 2022 would say, "What were you wearing?" Would say that is disgusting. And I really, really hope the Republicans keep their people accountable for this. If you're a Republican, please, for the love of God, call out this bullshit. I'm begging you, please, to do it. Now, at the same event, Herbster is also alleged to have groped a different woman on the buttocks. Salma said that the incident was described accurately. So 6 women, including the woman Salma says she saw groped, told the publication that Herbster inappropriately touched them when, as the Examiner described it, they were saying hello or goodbye to him, or when they were posing for photos side by side. The women said Herbster groped them on the buttocks outside of their clothes, continuing during political events or beauty pageants, the Examiner said. Each woman said that she was grabbed, not inadvertently grazed, by Herbster. The Examiner said that it corroborated each of the 6 women's accounts with at least one other witness to each alleged incident. Quote, "I'm scared for any young women that he would be dealing with in the future," one unnamed woman told the publication. "Don't send your daughters to work for this guy." And later on Thursday, Herbster issued a blanket denial that called the reporters libelous accusations that are 100% false. You got more than 2 people accused. You got more than a person accusing you, dude. You can't say these are wrong, and especially when it's from your own political party. All right, this isn't gonna fly. I know, at least I hope it doesn't fly. Now, former Nebraska Governor Kay Orr, the nation's first ever female Republican elected governor, called for the men who witnessed Herbster's alleged behavior to come forward. The Nebraska Examiner reporter who broke the story, Aaron Sanderford, defended his reporting and the publication's decision to go forward with the story. The Nebraska Examiner has no connection to the conservative Washington Examiner. So in the statement, quote, the allegations against Charles Herbster have been an open rumor in Nebraska political circles for longer than any of the candidates have been in the race. But it was not an easy article to report, Sanderford, who has spent years covering Nebraska politics, wrote in the statement posted on Twitter. He continued on to say, these are women who's experienced trauma and were extremely reluctant to discuss what happened to them. They are conservative women politically. Some even backed Charles Herbster, and they had nothing to gain from coming forward. Now, two men and a woman on Monday put their names behind what they said either saw what they said they either saw directly or were told immediately after about Nebraska's gubernatorial candidate Charles Herbster groping young women at political events. All three said they were upset by Herbster's denial of the behavior. Herbster has vehemently denied the women's allegation by calling them lies. Now, in a response question from the conservative KFAB talk radio host Ian Swanson, hold on a second. Thank you. Ewan Sensen said that he had done nothing in the past 5 years that might be misinterpreted as groping a woman without her consent. It's really interesting that he says in the past 5 years. Bro, you're telling on yourself, man. I'm telling you. They always tell on themselves. I think that's ridiculous, Edward Bone said Monday of Herbster's denials, because I've seen him firsthand grope women. And you didn't call him out, bro? Or did you? You just didn't mean anything. So Boone, a combat veteran and current Nebraska legislator aide, said he came forward Monday because he didn't want Sama to have to stand alone. He said he was sitting with friends and acquaintances at the Douglas County Republican Party's annual Elephant Remembers fundraising dinner in 2019 when Herbster walked up to their table and introduced himself. Boone, confirming what the Examiner reported last week, said Herbster shook the hands of young men at the table. When young women at the table reached out their hand, Herbster pulled them into a hug, Boone said. While introducing himself to one of the women, he started to hug her, Boone said. He then moved his hands down to her buttocks and deliberately and aggressively grabbed them. Boone said he asked the women afterwards she wanted him to intervene with Herbster. She said no. She wanted to put this traumatic experience behind her, Boone said. She still fears retribution for Herbster because of his wealth and power, he said. Boone's decision to go public was one of faith and ethics, he said, not politics. He said he didn't originally want his name used out of concern it might identify the woman involved. Alex De Garmo, a legislative staffer who worked on Governor Pete Ricketts' 2018 campaign, said he came forward Monday to support Sama not of any political motivation. DeGarmo also attended the 2019 dinner. He said Sama told him at the event that Herbster had just reached up her dress and touched her as she was walking past him. DeGarmo says Sama was shaken and disturbed. The allegations made by Senator Julie Sama against Charles Herbster are undeniably true, DeGarmo said. I was told in confidence immediately after it occurred about the interaction that took place. Kelsey McDonald said that watching Sama step forward to say what happened to her was a key reason McDonald decided to come forward by name about what she saw at Herbster's kickoff event for his gubernatorial bid. McDonald, who is also attending a college out of state, had been a staffer and volunteer in the local geopolitics. She worked on the campaign of U.S. Representative Don Bacon and Jeff Fotenberry. McDonald went to the April 2021 kickoff event in Fairmont with two of her friends. All were excited to see Herbster and his national campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway. Because of course they were. Everybody likes Kellyanne Conway in the political circles, right? It's kind of weird, but whatever. They were all fans. Neither of her friends had been involved in political campaigns, she said, and thought it would be fun to attend. Then they went to take a picture of themselves with Herbster. After a picture, we were walking away, McDonald said. My friend says, oh my God, Charles Herbster grabbed my ass. A Herbster staffer heard the woman say that, and her comments were relayed to at least two other campaign workers that day, former staffers told the Examiner. So again, disgusting, unwarranted, inappropriate, assaulty behavior should not be tolerated by anybody. I'm glad that Republicans are coming forward to tell that this particular Republican had done this. I would hope that if a Democrat had similar allegations against him or her, mostly him, but of him or her, that Democrats would also come forward and not try to rally around their own. And we saw some of that happen with, oh damn, I can't remember the guy's name. Senator, comedian. Oh God, Saturday Night Live. Comedian, Al Franken. Saw that similar to Al Franken. We saw that partially with Andrew Cuomo, etc. So I'd hope that we would not see similar things happen there. We would see similar things happen there, not the opposite. Sorry about that. But that wraps up our state politics section. So let us continue on with some minor news bites. And starting with an update of Elon Musk's bid to take over Twitter. Now, as we reported last week, Elon made a bid to buy Twitter for $43 billion. And last Friday, Twitter adopted a limited duration shareholder rights plan, often called a poison pill. Such a move is a common way to fend off a potential hostile takeover by diluting the stake of the entity eyeing the takeover. Now, what is essentially done here is that essentially the board will release some of its shares below market value from its reserves, and that would, but only to people that are not trying to do the hostile takeover in the hopes of them voting against the hostile takeover. It's a pretty typical move to prevent hostile takeovers because people don't like hostile takeovers. Now, the board voted unanimously to adopt this plan. Quote, the rights plan will reduce the likelihood that any entity, person, or group gains control of Twitter through open market accumulation without paying all shareholders an appropriate control premium or without providing the board sufficient time to make informed judgments and take action that are in the best interest of shareholders, the company said in a press release. Now, Twitter noted that the rights plan would not prevent the board from accepting an acquisition offer if the board deems it to be in the best interest of the company and its shareholders. But Musk said that there is a plan B if his initial offer to buy the company and take it private, which he has called his best and final, is rejected. He decided to provide further details in a TED interview. That was last Friday. As of this morning, Elon Musk said that he had lined up $46.5 billion in financing to buy Twitter, and he's trying to negotiate an agreement with the company. Man, I'm getting thirsty. The Tesla CEO said in documentation filed with the United States securities regulators, the SEC, that he's exploring what's known as a tender offer to buy all of the social media's platform's common stock for $54.20 per share in cash. Under a tender offer, Musk, who owns about 9% of Twitter shares, would take his offer directly to other shareholders, bypassing the board. But Musk hasn't decided yet whether to do that. The documents filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission say San Francisco-based Twitter Inc. has not responded to Musk's proposal. But of course they haven't. It's just now happened, right? Well, they kind of did, but they haven't responded to this. Now, the filing states that entities released to Musk have received commitment letters committing to provide an aggregate of approximately $46.5 billion. The financing would come from Morgan Stanley and other financial institutions. Some would be secured by stock that Musk owns in Tesla, the electric car and solar panel maker. Shares of Twitter were down slightly to 46.69 in Thursday's morning trading after the financing offer became public. The shares rose in price 7.51 below Musk's offer. Now, Musk, quote, is seeking to negotiate a definitive agreement for the acquisition of Twitter, and is prepared to begin such negotiations immediately, the document said. With a tender offer, Musk would try to get other shareholders to pledge their stock to him at a certain price on a certain date. If enough shareholders agree, Musk could then use that as leverage to get the board to drop the poison pill defense. Musk signaled the possibility of a tender offer several times this week in tweets using the word tender. So right now, there isn't really any losing. Okay, let me first say this is not financial program. We don't give financial advice. This is just an opinion of one man. Don't go out and buy stock. All right. Personally, I don't see any loss right now of buying Twitter stock, because in the long term, regardless of what happens, that stock is going to go up in value. So if you're in a gambling man and you want to sell your shares to Elon Musk, you can buy some on the open market right now for about $47. And you should make, $7, $8, or about $10 profit off of each share. Nothing really snazzy, but nothing to sneeze at either. If the deal doesn't go through, the selling of shares will keep the prices up. Some of it will get diluted a little bit. And it should go back up to about $40 a share, regardless of what happens. Personal opinion. This is not financial program. This is not financial advice. Got to say that, legally speaking. But yeah, so that's what I think. But you let me know what you think. Like I said, please go ahead and hit us up on Twitter with your thoughts and opinions at Crowdsource Poll for now. Because I keep saying for now, because we are going under a rebranding. We just haven't gotten the branding, logos, and stuff set up yet. We've decided on a name, though. Oh, that's not going away. Go away. Why didn't it go away? No. Highlights. No, not highlights. Call to action. There it is. So let's continue on with some economic news now. So the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell signaled today that the central bank may increase the federal funds rate by 0.5% at the meeting in May as inflation soars. We talked about this last week as well. The Fed raised its rates by 2.25% in March, a move that some economists have criticized as not aggressive enough, as inflation topped 8.5% year over year and topped month over month to 1.5%. That increased from the previous month, the fastest annual increase in 40 years. I would say that 50 basis points will be on the table for May meeting, Powell said Thursday during an International Monetary Fund discussion on the global economy outlook as finance officials met this week in Washington. Powell said that the decision is made meeting by meeting. The next meeting takes place May 3rd to the 4th. Quote, "It is appropriate in my view to move a little more quickly, and I also think there's something in the idea of a fronted loading whatever accommodation one thinks is appropriate," Powell said. That points in the direction of a basis point being on the table, certainly. Front loading means that, hey, we are going to raise rates by X amount over the course of the year. We're going to front load that and put most of the weight now and then taper it off going forward. Now, his comments are the latest in a series of remarks by Fed officials signaling more aggressive action could be in the works next month. In a recent interview, Federal Bank of New York's President John Williams said the 50 basis points is a reasonable option. The rise in prices last month was largely fueled by rising energy and food costs, which had been greatly affected by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Powell said that the U.S. economy is further removed than other countries from the effects of the war in Ukraine, but is still putting upward pressure on inflation. The U.S. economy is very strong, performing very well by most forecasts, Powell said. He noted that the strong labor market and said that the U.S. will have another very strong year of growth. The big issue that we're focused on is inflation and getting inflation back to our 2% goal, Powell said. I personally don't think you can have 2% inflation without a lot of stimulus from the federal government and have it be a 2% rate. If the federal government's not injecting money into the economy one way or the other, either through tax cuts, reimbursements, what have you, you're not going to have sub 4% unemployment without loose monetary policy. So we'll see if this goes. Now, bringing down inflation without pushing the U.S. economy into a recession is going to be a challenge, which is why I say I don't think this is going to be doable. So if unemployment goes up because prices go up and that puts people out of work, then that's going to cause a recession from where we're at now. And of course, that's bad. So for her part, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that it is possible, but requires skill and good luck to achieve the so-called soft landing. Powell on Thursday acknowledged the tough balancing act, getting supply and demand back in sync to bring down inflation without a slowdown that amounts to a recession. Powell noted that inflation is really a global problem and is high in most places. But he did argue there are differences with the US having very strong growth and high core inflation. When asked if he thought inflation had peaked last month, Powell was hesitant to set expectations. The central bank has faced criticism for saying throughout much of last year that inflation would be transitory before retiring the term. For our part, I have personally said that inflation is still transitory. The reason I believe it is transitory is because it is largely due to supply chain bottlenecks and issues with the supply chain. Just-in-time supply is dead or on its last leg and needs to be revived, and that's causing prices to go up as there aren't enough goods coming to market to meet everyone's demand. There's going to be some inflation from the loose monetary policy and the federal stimulus. That's going to cause prices to go up eventually once people start buying things, right? Because there's a bit more money in the circulation. But all of that, a lot of that could have been absorbed had the economy been back to its pre-pandemic levels, and it's not. And it's taking longer to get there for a variety of reasons. So we're not having sustained inflation in the traditional sense where no matter what the federal government does, there's still inflation. We're having a supply chain issue, and that needs to be remedied. But I understand why people are upset about this, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be upset about inflation. I just think that the upset should be directed where the cause actually is, and that is largely due to the supply stuff, the global economy being slowed down, people going just now back to work and producing goods they produced, China shutting down, etc. Now, Paul also noted that they had the expectation inflation would peak around this time and come down over the course of this year and next year. And without the war in Ukraine rather, by Russia, that might have been true. But that caused prices to go up significantly. As soon as the war hit, man, gas prices went up by like $1. Like, that's contributing, let's be real. Now, he said with expectations have been disappointing in the past, they now want to see actual progress. He said they don't know if inflation peaked in March and would not count on it. He also said that the Fed no longer expects help from the supply side being fixed. So that's where the Fed is at on this. All right, I need to stretch for a second. Let me stand up. All right, continuing on now. Now, the U.S. economic outlook is dimming and a downturn could be on the horizon, according to Fannie Mae economist. The mortgage lender said in a new economic and housing forecast that the economy faces a modest recession in 2023 as a result of the Fed's aggressive monetary policy tightening trajectory, fallout from the Russian war in Ukraine, and worst inflation in a generation. Quote, "We continue to see multiple drivers of economic growth through 2022, but the need to rein in inflation, combined with other economic indicators, such as the recent inversion of the Treasury yield curve, which is a classic, they believe it's an inversion of the yield curve, which is a classic indicator that the recession's happening. It's basically you have the Treasury note come above its asking price. It's complicated. I don't understand it fully, but some other people that I follow online have said there hasn't been an actual inversion yield. It was a temporary thing. It's not permanent. So we have to see. But they're saying that's one of the indicators. Continuing on, lead us to meaningfully downgrade our expectation for economic growth in 2023. Doug Duncan, Fannie Mae's chief economist, said in a statement. Now, the reason that they are saying this is that they're focused mainly on housing prices, and the housing supply in the United States is ridiculously low, historically low, actually. And that is because partly due to ease of monetary policy, which allows people to buy homes or get debt at cheaper rates. If you bought a home between 2020 and 2022, towards the, well, we'll say 2020 towards the end of 2021, you were able to get an interest rate of as low as 2% if your credit was good enough, or if you had enough collateral to go in. And the highest was around 3.5%, the median being 3%. And now we have home prices not only going up because a lot of people bought homes, a lot of investors bought homes, 20% of the market, as we said previously, bought up housing here. But you had an increase in value because of that, but also an increase of the interest rate to upwards of 5%. Now, 5% is still low from a long-term historical analysis. People that are borrowing money in the 70s had 10%. People in the 80s had to come up with 30% down and also had 10% interest rates, those sort of things. But, in my lifetime, or at least since the 90s, this is a very high inflation rate. It is a high inflation rate, but a very high interest rate. And that is causing more people to remove themselves from the market. And if they remove themselves from the market too quickly and the builders are still trying to build, then you could have a sudden drop in home prices. And that could trigger a recession due to people being underwater of their houses and stuff like that. Won't be like 2008. The conditions for another 2008 recession are not there, at least not yet. It took a decade for that to build up, a decade more to build up. We haven't even been 5 years into building up that level of contagion for this. But a minor recession, a minor correction recession, one to last 3 or 4 months, is possible in 2023 if the Fed is too aggressive too quickly. Again, the balancing act needs to be stated. Continuing on with some more economic news, and we have to get through this quickly. So let's go to it. So 2 years ago, we're talking about employment here. So 2 years ago, in mid-April, 4.2 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits in a single week. A year later, in mid-April of 2021, more than 17 million Americans were receiving state or federal jobless assistance. But in the week that ended April 16th of this year, only 184,000 Americans filed for unemployment, according to the Labor Department. And that's even high by recent standards. The 4-week average is a little bit over 177,000. Even before the pandemic, it was rare for first-time jobless claims to fall consistently below 200,000 week after week. But that's where we are, according to Andrew Stutter, senior fellow at the Century Foundation. Quote, "It is absolutely great news that workers are now being forced to apply for unemployment. It is absolutely great news that workers are not being forced to apply for unemployment benefits. The job market is strong. People are very confident about their ability to find jobs quickly if they lose a job," Stetner said. But not many workers are losing their jobs, according to Andrew Challenger, Senior Vice President at Outplacement from Challenger, Gary and Christmas. Layoffs are a historic low, near record highs in job openings across the country. Employers are hanging on to their employees at any cost. And tight labor markets can also be another indicator that a recession might happen, because if you don't have enough people producing goods and services that want it, businesses lose money and aren't able to pay debts, and being defaulting and that sort of stuff makes it possible. Also, another indicator. Because if the economy runs too hot, well, it's going to come down, right? So the costs are including hiking wages and offering show up for your first day of work bonuses, especially for high demand service jobs. Nearly 2 million people were working before the pandemic who aren't now. That includes a lot of parents, especially mothers of young children. One reason they're on the sidelines, there aren't enough childcare slots or enough teachers. There is a risk that this whole tight labor market, low unemployment situation could unravel, according to Richard Wahlquist, president of American Staffing Association, which is a temp work agency. We're in completely uncharted territory, both in terms of fiscal monetary policy and then the geopolitical issues, Wahlquist said. But so far, he said, consumers' demand and employer demand for workers show no sign of slowing down. All right, we have some updates about unions and Starbucks. But we are actually going to no, we got some time. I'll go ahead and talk about it. All right, let's talk about this a little bit. So the National Labor Relations Board has filed, hold on a second. That was not at all brought in correctly. All right. So we have now let's get on to talk about unions after talking about unemployment, and this time with an update about Starbucks unionizing efforts. So the National Labor Relations Board has filed a second complaint against Starbucks Corp. For unfair labor practices against pro-union baristas in Arizona. Across the country, more than 200 of the coffee chain's 9,000 company-operated stores have filed for union elections, and more than a dozen have approved unions, including workers at Starbucks in Mensa, who who approved to unionize in February. To date, none have successfully negotiated a contract. Now, baristas have filed dozens of unfair labor practices charges against the coffee giant amid their effort to unionize. In March, the NLRB investigators in Arizona became the first to advance a complaint against the Seattle-based company, saying that they had found sufficient evidence of alleged retaliation and intimidation at a Phoenix Starbucks location. On April 13th, investigators filed a second complaint alleging further mistreatment, including discipline, interrogations, coercive statements, according to agency records. This being happened at the Scottsdale 101 shopping center Starbucks location. Now, according to the complaint, Starbucks has until April 27th to respond, with a hearing set for June before the NLRB administrative judge. We also have some union news coming out of Amazon. So Amazon filed to stop a historic first of its kind unionizing effort at a Staten Island fulfillment center, despite documents showing it was considering spending up to $100,000 per month on anti-union consultants to try to kill it. Yes, heard me correctly. $100,000 per month to try to kill a union. That means they know the union's going to be big and it's going to cost them money. So new Amazon documents filed with the U.S. Department of Labor suggest that the company engaged consultants for a rate of up to $20,000 per week in an aggressive effort to persuade workers to abandon unionization efforts. Hey, The documents were first spotted by Business Insider on Tuesday. One of the documents, dated October 24th, 2021, appears to be a letter exchange between Amazon and labor consulting firm Live Labor LLC. The letter appears to detail weekly pay for 5 Lev consultants who were, quote, being engaged to represent the interests of Amazon relative to labor matters at its Staten Island, New York facility. According to the letter, each engaged consultant would receive at least $400 per hour, working a minimum of 6 hours per day. That's outrageous. Once meal and travel is factored in, each individual consultant could expect to receive anywhere between $17,000 and $20,000 per week for their services, according to the letter. Amazon would have to pay Lev between $85,000 and $100,000 per week to pay for the 5 consultants. In a bio on Lev's website, President and CEO Katie Lev is described as having experience managing numerous organization campaigns involving quickie elections, mailboxes, decertifications, neutrality agreements, and even a hunger strike. Quote, whether you just received your first petition, have multiple mature contracts, or are facing a corporate campaign, we're the partner for you and your union issues, Lev says on its website. Neither Amazon nor Lev Labor responded to Gizmodo's request for comment. It's unclear if their deal went through, though. Now, Amazon's anti-union checkbook expands far beyond Staten Island. Department of Labor filings spotted by HuffPo last month reportedly show Amazon allegedly paid anti-union consultants a total of $4.3 million in 2021. That figure eclipsed money spent on most of the nation's biggest anti-union spenders, according to a recent Economic Policy Institute analysis. Amazon's seemingly allergic reaction when it comes to dealing with union reaches all the way up to the top. In a leak recording of an all-hands meeting this week obtained by The Verge, CEO Andy Jassy spoke out against unions, arguing that they could potentially slow down production and disempower workers. Remember, folks, if a person is saying you don't need a union, they're your boss, you need a union. All right? When they say disempower employees, they really mean disempower employers. It's projection all the way through. And thanks. I'm glad that you're able to see me streaming again. So, quote, this is quote from what Jassy said. One of the things that's unique about Amazon is that we have an unusual empowerment for our employees, not for the lower levels. If they see something they can do better for customers or just for themselves to get together in a room, decide to change it and do it quickly. We encourage that type of speed. You know, you're part of the union. It's much slower and much more bureaucratic, much harder to do that. Yeah, but it's much easier to get wage concessions and healthcare benefits and everything else when you're in a union. The employees don't really care about changing the job up and doing things better so much if they're not going to get paid more for doing it. But if you pay them more, they're willing to do stuff like this. So maybe you should pay them more or get stuck with a union. Now, with that sentiment, Jassy follows in the footsteps of his former boss, Jeff Bezos, who is notorious for his at times aggressive anti-union stances. It's possible Amazon's already hefty spending on anti-unionization efforts will only increase this year as more warehouse consider following the Staten Island workers' momentum. Just this week, around 25% of workers in a small New Jersey facility reportedly showed interest in forming a union. That's a lot. Oddly, the labor group looking to represent those workers withdrew their petition one day later under unclear circumstances. Elsewhere in the worker class tech sector, Apple retail workers in Atlanta became the first to file for a union election this week as well. So, hey, everybody, workers live work. Anyway, no, I'm not going to do all that. Again, unions are a good thing. They can be very beneficial to workers. They can be corrupt as well. So there is some give and take here. But on the whole, unions are way better for workers than not having a union is. So that's what we need to see here. All right. Now, for those that might have seen us before, we like at the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, or at the News Roundup, I should say, we at the News Roundup like to end our segments with a little bit of things that are tongue in cheek. What we like to
you
call.
saw in the clip there.
Hold on.
If you want to optimize and take it.
Stop.
Optimize
Stop.
and take.
I hate autoplay.
To another.
Stop autoplaying. Okay. All right. We at the News Roundup like to do a segment we like to call News of the Weird. And this News of the Weird this week is coming out of Tucker Carlson's documentary, quote unquote, End of Men, and his interview with a guy that likes to tan his balls. So we're going to listen to a segment about that. And, first, I accidentally closed out the tweet. So first, we're going to watch the trailer, which everybody has seen, but we want to see it too, because it's funny and very erotic. Like, I don't know, man, maybe Republicans are a little gay. There's nothing wrong with being gay, but this video is pretty erotic, pretty manly. All right, so let's go ahead and watch this video. Right, so this is the trailer for Fox News. Tucker Carlson presents The End of Men, and remember, Tucker Carlson's falling in the vein of Bill O'Reilly, except he's more righty and pernicious than Bill O'Reilly was. Let's watch. Behold, the tanning of my balls.
Once a society collapses, then you're in hard times. Well, hard iron sharpens iron, as they say.
Hard iron sharpens iron. We have to have all these things to make us more manly because we're in a collapsed society, apparently. Why do they think we're in a collapsed society? Is it because gay people and women are doing better?
Hard times inevitably
I think it is.
Produce men who are tough, men who are resourceful, men who are strong enough to survive.
They like to drink raw eggs.
And then they go on to re-establish order, and so the cycle begins again.
Dun dun dun. All right, that is the Tucker Carlson documentary intro. Everybody saw it. Everybody's been talking about it. We want to talk about it here. So, what are they talking about? Well, the Tucker Carlson video here and The End of Men is actually talking about the drastic reduction over time, pretty drastic. This is true. This part is true, of testosterone levels in men. Nobody knows what's really causing it, or there's not a defined factor, but there's many factors at play. One of those factors could actually be our diet, the fact that we are more sedentary. We sit around a lot more is what I'm trying to say. I can't do words good sometimes. So we sit around more, we don't do as much physical activity, and physical activity actually helps produce testosterone. Or it can be plastic getting into our bodies and affecting our testosterone build production. All these factors are there is evidence that all these factors are contributing to it. But it's not a sissification of men. It's not the whole quote unquote too much soy. Soy doesn't work on the body that way. Don't believe people that say that. But there are things that we do have in our diet and the way that we live now that make us more likely to experience lower testosterone levels than men in the past. But this solution that they're talking about is just bonkers. And in this case, they are talking about tanning testicle machine that is called a Joovv. That's spelled Joovv. It is a rectangular panel that emits pulsed red and near infrared light that allegedly improves cellular health and rejuvenation. It also cleans about $1,649 from your wallet, which sounds only slightly more reasonable when you divide it by 2. Good one, Nikki. Appreciate that joke. And we're going to watch a video about that now as well. Now, to put that in terms, the Fox News male viewers might better understand to put this in terms that some viewers might better understand, the cost of roasting your testicles with this device is equivalent of buying 47 king-sized My Pillows. Well, let's listen to this ridiculousness of the video from the guy that's promoting it.
You saw
51 seconds
there,
coming out of
if you want to optimize and take it to another level, expose yourself to red light therapy.
Yes.
And the Joovv that we were using in the documentary, there's a massive amount
Which is testicle tanning.
It's testicle tanning, but it's also full
Don't tan
body
your balls, people. Don't
red
do
light
it.
therapy, which has
Don't do it.
massive amount of benefits. And there's so much data out there
No, there's not.
that isn't being picked up on or covered.
So
Yeah,
obviously
that's because it's
half
false.
the viewers right now are like, what? That's testicle tanning? That's crazy. But
Now, what we're about to hear Tucker Carlson say now, okay? What we're about to hear him say now is actually the point of the whole video. He's interviewing quacks to purposely talk about what he's about to say next.
But my view is, okay, testosterone levels crash and nobody says anything about it. That's crazy.
This is also not true. This has been a thing that has been studied by the government, that has gone into research. It has been a thing that's been talked about a lot online, not just by Republicans and conservatives that like mainly men masculinity, but also by endocrinologists and other people, because they view it as a possible negative impact on individuals' health and well-being. Remember that. This has been talked about. It might not have filtered down to you, but it's not an issue of it being, it's not necessarily an issue of it not being talked about. It's an issue of maybe the media not knowing how to report on it. But I've known about this for years, and I'm not a right winger. All right. I'm just a kid on the internet. Well, was a kid on the internet. So yeah, don't let them lie to you like this.
So why is it crazy to seek solutions?
It's not crazy to seek solutions. And I think
it's crazy to seek solutions. They're going to blink you out of about $1,700 that aren't proven to work. It's a grift.
Recently exposed to a term called bromeopathy, and I think there's a lot of people out there right now that are
just dudes being dudes. Bro out, man. No, stop it.
Or don't trust the mainstream information, and
that's because they are prepped to not trust the mainstream information by people like Tucker Carlson. Again, this guy is grifting.
You saw in the
I think that was the end of the video.
Or don't trust the mainstream information, and they're taking. You saw.
All right, so that's the end of the video here. Now, to completely end this segment, we want to do a little tongue-in-cheek song that we saw on TikTok that was tagged with all the can see testicle tanners and everything else like this. It's tongue-in-cheek. It's not, if you have saggy nuts. Honestly, if you're a dude and you have saggy stuff, it's not because your testosterone is low. It's because you're too hot, and you might have other things. And there's underwear out there that can help you. Trust me. We'll just put it that way. That was probably too TMI, but it's not related. This is just a funny video, and we felt that it gives a nice little rerun of what we're doing. So let's
do your balls hang low? Do they wobble to and fro? Can you tie them in a knot? Can you tie 'em in a bow? Can you throw 'em on your shoulder like a continental soldier? Do your balls hang low? Ting-a-ling, hot damn. Find a woman if you can.
Exactly. Do it.
If you can't find a woman, find a clean old man. If you're ever in Gibraltar, take a flying leap at Walter. Do your balls hang low?
Ice baths.
Do your balls hang low? Do they walk? Do.
All right. So that is what we wanted to end our little news roundup segment with. But with that, everybody, I am sad to say that we are actually out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, so go ahead and smash that like button, the follow button, the subscribe button, wherever you're watching this at. It really does help us out with the algorithms. If you enjoyed this program and you want to see clips from us, go to our YouTube channel, which you can find in the links above or below, or if you're watching us YouTube, you know where it's at. And watch some of our segment clips that explain some of these things, maybe in a little more detail, maybe in a section you missed, maybe you missed our news roundup from the previous week. We like to make clips in order to keep people informed and do fun little things. We're also going to be producing more shorts, and soon we'll have a TikTok, so stay tuned for those. We again want to thank you all so much for joining us, because without you, we would just be some people shouting out into the void that is the internet. So special thanks goes out to CSP Nikki, who is our producer. Please go ahead and friend her or whatever on Twitter. We just did a shout out for her. And like, be sure to check out our other programs: Cypher State, Foreign Affairs and Foreign Policy, Praxis Run, interviews with activists and etc., the News Roundup, and Crowdsourced Politics proper, for long, in-depth conversations with people about different subjects, inviting anybody that wants to come on to talk about things that they are passionate about, that are political, social, culturally focused, and have a lot of information to share with us. Again, if that's something that you do, you can find us at Twitter, again, at Crowdsourced Poll for now, and hit us up on there if you'd like to come on to the show. We also have a Facebook group, Tribune Commons, and the like. So yeah, that's what we like to do here. So go ahead and stick with us if you're watching us on Twitch, because we will be raiding we're going to raid Stardust today. Yeah, we're going to raid Stardust. Stardust is good peoples. So we're going to go ahead and raid Stardust. She makes Mimi content sometimes, does interviews and stuff. Some of it's good, some of it whatever, but she's good people, so we're going to go ahead and raid into her channel. And as always, like we like to say at Crowdsourced Politics, keep your head up through the political storm.